Welcome to another week of Salute Your Sports. No Drew Brackett this week. I'm Kamen Enchev. Tom Castleman here as always. We've got a fun show today, a lot to talk about. We'll be talking about the opening week of college football, some of our favorites to make the playoffs and win it all so early in the season. Who knows if we'll be right? The NFL top 100 player list, betting locks of the week, and much, much more.
Yeah, we'll also be touching on a different ranking system. We've gone over the quarterbacks. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the non-quarterbacks as well as just in general. We've heard from the players themselves. Who do the NFL players think are the best of their peers, their contemporaries going into the season? So we'll be touching on that as well, along with a little bit of baseball. We went from AL last week into NL this week, but of course, we've got arguably the biggest game of the season already in week one. College football sure knows how to get things kicked off with their official week one now that we've wrapped up the exhibitionary week zero. We have number 5, Georgia, number 3, Clemson. Early on, this is going to be a big matchup that can very well determine who's going to be playing in the college football playoff in December and January this year. Common, what are your initial thoughts on this game?
Yeah, and this game, by the way, opening line is -3 for Clemson, I think is what I saw. This is on a neutral field, and I believe Charlotte, North Carolina. I should mention we'll have our betting locks of the week, too, at the end of the show, my favorite segment. But, of course, this is a powerhouse matchup, and this is a matchup where early on we'll have an idea of who can make the playoff because whichever team wins this game is in prime position for a playoff. It's one of those where if they win this game, they can probably lose a game and still make the playoff. Whereas if they do lose this game, they basically have to almost go undefeated, if not the rest of the way. My first impression of this matchup is that I like Clemson in this game. I think they return 9 of 11 starters on defense. I know Travis Etienne's a big loss at running back, but they also get Justin Ross back at wide receiver. He was out last year with an injury in 2019. He had 865 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns the year before that. And DJ, say it for me, Tom, because I'm going to mess it up. Yes, him, DJ, Clemson's new quarterback. I said this last week. I think he might be better than Trevor Lawrence in the game against Notre Dame. He was a star last season in the 2 games he played. 439 pass yards against a great Notre Dame team. Trevor Lawrence's career high was 404 before that. So I think he was the top recruit coming in last year. This guy is ready to take over. I really don't think they lose anything with him at quarterback compared to Trevor Lawrence. And their defense is just as good. Etienne is maybe their one big loss, but they're a stacked team. And to me, the quarterback position is the biggest difference in this game. I think JT Daniels for Georgia, to me, is clearly worse than DJ. He played well down the stretch last season, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks, but he beat Mississippi State, South Carolina, Mizzou, our alma mater, and Cincinnati. Not the toughest competition out there. And Georgia is missing a lot of players. This team lost a lot from last season's team, particularly on defense. They lost both their starting cornerbacks, a defensive end, a safety, several linebackers, and Tyke Smith, who was supposed to be a starting corner for them, is out of this game with an injury. So I look at Clemson with DJ and their wide receivers, which they have plenty of good guys coming back. I think they're going to pass all over Georgia, and Georgia's going to have a tough time in the secondary stopping Clemson in this game.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with these preseason rankings with Georgia being 5th, in spite of everything that you mentioned, Common. I'm kind of wondering here, what do the experts know that we possibly don't? I mean, clearly, despite all these losses, Georgia, is this just a brand name program thing for them? Or do they just have a bunch of guys that we simply don't know about yet? That's, part of the reason why this line is as close as it is on a neutral site. It's probably, give or take a couple of points if it's in Clemson or in Athens, Georgia. But, I like Clemson as well for a lot of the reasons that you stated. We know DJ Uiagalelei can play against some big competition going up in a thriller of a game against Notre Dame last season. And Notre Dame was a pretty proven program, definitely a step below that top tier with, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. but certainly the best of the rest, I think is a pretty fair way of putting it. As far as, playoff implications go, looking at the schedules ahead, Clemson can afford to lose this game. Just looking at the rest of their schedule, they don't have any currently ranked opponents. They should be able to breeze through their schedule, and having that conference championship is going to be a big boon. Georgia is the team that actually is facing a lot more pressure in this game. It's going to be interesting to see how Kirby Smart has his players kind of reacting to that, because we've seen Georgia come up short in big pressure situations against, granted, Alabama of all
Who
programs. A
hasn't?
lot of teams come up short against Alabama. But looking at their schedule, they've got a game against Florida. It's at home, but Florida is a ranked team and certainly on the rise potentially this year. And then even if they do lose this game to Clemson, they could just lose to Alabama in the championship game for the SEC with 2 losses. Are they going to make the playoffs? I don't think that's happened with a 2-loss bid team. So they've definitely got a lot more pressure on them. I think Clemson is maybe not as big of a favorite as you think they are. I think I'm a little bit more inclined to think they're between that 3 and 7 point range in winning this game. I think it'll be fairly close, but it'll be interesting to see how Georgia responds to this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be close too. I mean, that 3-point line, probably fair, but I think, you know, if you're a betting man, which I happen to be, I'm not
We
putting
might be
this.
hearing about this later.
Yeah, I'm not putting this on our betting locks of the week. Not quite, but I do think that Clemson, to me, is a safe cover in this game. And I think the reason why Georgia is ranked so high is because Kirby Smart and what that program has done. They've been a staple of consistency. But when you look at those numbers, who's returning, who's not, stuff like that, it tends to, like, early on in a game like that, if you have more returning starters and more proven players, it bodes better for you. I think some of these Georgia guys are going to get better as the season goes on. I mentioned their corner that's out for this game because of injury. They've also got a starting tight end out because of injury. So it seems like a lot of things for this game, at least, are trending in Clemson's favor. I do think that Georgia is going to be a very, very good team. They have a very good recruiting class. That's one thing that we don't really talk about. But Georgia, really, the last few seasons has been right up there with Alabama as the top recruiting class. So every year they get new kids that are just really, really good. But I think Clemson's quarterback, DJ, I mean, I think he is such a difference maker. I think I said this last week. I think he's going to be a Heisman Trophy finalist, probably win the Heisman Trophy. And we'll talk about it here in this next segment, who we think makes the Final Four and maybe wins it all. I mean, I know I kind of was thinking Alabama last week, but maybe I'll be changing my mind. I think that's just how good he is as a player. And you mentioned Georgia has pretty much beaten everyone the last few years. They've struggled against Alabama. Well, Clemson is basically like Alabama 1A. That's how good Clemson is. They've really sort of separated themselves along with Alabama from the pack as a top 2 college football program. Obviously, every year someone could emerge like an Ohio State and LSU. But when we think of the top 4 college football playoffs, those are the first 2 names that come to mind, Alabama and Clemson.
Absolutely. And kind of moving into that conversation, I think that, Alabama is probably the safest pick of all the teams for making it into the playoff. Currently, for the college rankings, we have Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Ohio State. I think Alabama and Oklahoma are virtual locks. I would be absolutely floored if neither of those 2 teams are in the playoffs. So I don't know how much of a discussion we want to have on them. I think kind of like 3 through 4 and kind of a couple of teams kind of on the outside looking in. I think that's a far more interesting conversation, because we have an Ohio State team that is reloading after losing Justin Fields, Trey Sermon. I mean, they still have Chris Olave, the outstanding wide receiver, but they play in the Big Ten, and how is that going to kind of shake out over the course of the season? Clemson, I think, is a fairly safe pick, but again, a lot can change in just this one weekend going up against Georgia. So since we've already touched on Clemson and Georgia and kind of their stakes, I think we're pretty much in line with who we think out of those 2 teams is going to make it into the playoffs. But kind of outside of that, what are you seeing? What are you thinking, might be kind of that pivotal 4th team making it into the playoff this year?
Yeah, I think the 4th slot is wide open. Just to real quickly sort of hit on some of the things you said to reiterate on that and give the stats. I think absolutely. Alabama's made the college football playoff in 6 out of 7 years, and they've been the number 1 overall seed in 4 of them. They're in Oklahoma, 8 of 11 starters back on offense, 10 of 11 on defense. Their quarterback is back, a Heisman favorite there. They're a lock in what is pretty much a weak Big 12, and we saw them finish last season with 8 straight wins. They had a very young team last year. They obviously figured that out. And Clemson, to me, I think, is also a virtual lock. You mentioned that they don't play a single team in the top 25 outside of that opening game week. They'll probably meet UNC maybe in the conference championship game, but their conference is not that good. And it's sort of shaped up well for them that they don't even play what is actually the second best team in their conference in UNC. Of course, Notre Dame, no longer in the ACC. So those to me are the 3 locks. I think the 4 spot is where it gets really interesting. You look at Ohio State's ranked 4th, Georgia 5th, A&M 6th, Iowa State 7th, Cincinnati 8th, Notre Dame 9th, UNC 10th, Oregon 11th. This is just my gut feeling, Tom. I just have a gut feeling on Ohio State not making it this year. First off, it's really, really hard to constantly make it and make the championship, but they've only got 5 returning starters on defense and 6 on offense. So half their team is gone from last season. I know CJ Stroud is a really talented quarterback, a big recruit, but he actually had a mini quarterback battle, which scares me that he wasn't the unanimous number 1. And he didn't throw a pass last season. I know Alabama and Clemson have young quarterbacks, but those guys played for those teams. If they win the Big Ten, yeah, they'll probably make it. Big Ten, though, has a lot of really good teams, not many great teams. But I have a feeling that that conference is going to be pretty open and pretty close. Also, Ohio State plays Oregon in the non-conference. I don't like Georgia as a second SEC team making it just because I think they lose to Clemson. And even if they win their conference or their side of the SEC, they'll lose to Bama in the title game.
Right.
A&M plays Alabama this season. It's at A&M. If they can pull an upset, maybe lose by 3 to 4 points, they have a chance. But we saw what happened last season. A&M 1 loss to Alabama, granted by 28, but a 1 loss to an Alabama team not winning your conference championship didn't work for them. So I don't like A&M in the 6th spot. I don't like Iowa State in the 7th spot. I don't think they're going to beat Oklahoma, and I don't think they're going to win the Big 12 championship. So I don't think a 2-loss team out of the Big 12 can make it. Cincinnati's number 8. They have a little bit more of a chance this season. They play at Indiana, at Notre Dame. If they win both of those games, they're in the discussion, but they're not going to win at Notre Dame. Let me save you the time and tell you that's not going to happen. The college football playoff is going to go down. The 4th seed is going to go down to 2 teams to me. Neither are in the top 10. I'll let you talk, and then I'll have you guess who maybe those 2 teams are. Because UNC's 10th. I don't think UNC makes it either. Actually, no, one of them is in the top 10. I lied. One of them is in the top 10.
Notre Dame, right? Because that's
Notre Dame.
Okay, so I thought you were going to go to Notre Dame. That's why you really had me surprised when you said outside of the top 10, because I was like, oh, hang on a second, because I figured you'd probably go, just based on your reasoning, you'd probably go Pac-12 on this one, with Oregon being the team that's going to just kind of ride through everything. And then I thought Notre Dame, but you had me scrambling further down the list.
My bad. Well, and I'll tell you real quickly why I do like Notre Dame. I think they also lose a lot of players, but they get their best player back. I think Kyron Williams is their best player. I know Ian Book played well down the stretch, and you're the quarterback at Notre Dame. You're going to get a lot of attention. But let's be honest, the reason why Notre Dame won last season was their defense and their running game. And Kyron Williams comes back this season after a breakout freshman year. I think he's going to be great for them. And we've seen Notre Dame. You mentioned Georgia beating everyone but Alabama. That's sort of been Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been phenomenal the last few years. They've only really struggled when they've gone up against an Alabama or sort of a top 5 team. We've seen them struggle in the playoff, stuff like that. But I mean, you look at their schedule. They play a fairly tough schedule, but they don't play anyone that's a top 5 team. They play number 12 Wisconsin, number 8 Cincinnati, number 15 USC, and number 10 North Carolina. But guess what those 4 games all have in common? None of them are on the road. The Wisconsin game,
Mhm.
they play at Soldier Field on a neutral field. Then they host the other games. I like them against Cincinnati. I like them against North Carolina. They won at North Carolina last year and matched up really well against them. And I like them against USC. I mean, USC hasn't beaten Notre Dame in recent seasons, and I don't know. I don't have like an info update on all the USC players, but to me, it feels like at number 15, they're almost like overranked. We haven't seen USC do anything in recent years. And then Oregon is the other one that you mentioned. They've got 9 of 11 starters back on offense and 7 of 11 on defense, which includes sophomore defensive end Kayvon Thibodeau, who is going to be one of the top picks in next year's NFL draft, if not number 1. That's how good he is. They're the top team in the Pac-12. They've got a transfer quarterback, Anthony Brown from Boston College. That's going to help them. I think a big week for them is week 2 against Ohio State. If they win that game, they're in the driver's seat. If they lose a close game, they're still in the driver's seat, because if they run the table in the Pac-12 and go undefeated, then they're in good position. I still think it's going to be Notre Dame, simply because I think Notre Dame goes undefeated. They beat 4 ranked teams and go undefeated. Assuming Oregon does lose to Ohio State, which I think they will ultimately lose that game on the road, I think Notre Dame gets the 4 spot and then gets shellacked once again against either Alabama, Clemson, or Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think for the 4th spot, I mean, I think Ohio State's probably the most likely to take it, because they just have such a loaded program. But if we're talking about, potential some outside teams making it in, I mean, if Notre Dame makes it into the college football playoff, they will have earned it given their schedule. Same thing for Oregon, but I'll go Cincinnati as my dark horse favorite
You
team.
would.
I don't necessarily think that they're going to make it in per se, but they have enough returning players. I think that they were close to winning their bowl game last year. They're the ones that had like that last second field goal where they lost to Georgia, if I remember. And they're playing these good teams on the road. If they beat Indiana and Notre Dame on the road, something to keep in mind. Notre Dame has a lot of fresh faces coming in, and by week 4, they should be pretty well gelling together. But that's still early enough where Cincinnati could surprise them. And then if they make it through Indiana and Notre Dame, they just cruise through the rest of their schedule. They could go very well undefeated, and it would be hard if they, are undefeated against Notre Dame, against Indiana, to keep them out. It would take probably Ohio State being undefeated and winning the Big Ten in order for that to happen. So I know it's a very long shot, but I'm going to cheer for it because I want to see the underdogs go and play in this game, go up against Alabama and see, if everyone else is getting shellacked, at least have somebody else, somebody new doing that. And who even knows what a Bearcat is? That's just a cool thing to cheer for, I think.
Sure. I knew you were going to go Cincinnati. When we came that list, of course, I go with a power, a traditional powerhouse in Notre Dame. You go with the underdog Cincinnati.
Yeah,
I mean,
why not?
that's just how you draw it up. I do want to say this, though. I know we talk a lot about the 4th team getting shellacked, but that's been everyone. It seems like every year the college football playoff, it's like I don't know, like it's a good thing, but it's sort of received like in between reviews. The 1-4 matchup has almost always been a blowout. In fact, a lot of the semifinal games have been a blowout, particularly, but the 1-4 has always been a blowout. So yeah, you're right. Whether it's Notre Dame or whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Oregon, whether it's Ohio State, whoever it may be, and obviously things can change. Things do change, but I think this season, I think we've got 3 teams who are clearly the best. Maybe someone else emerges. Maybe it's Ohio State. They did it last year. But we talked about on the show last season, when we did our previews, we said it's Alabama and Clemson are top 2. Ohio State is maybe the 3rd team. Well, what happened? We had Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Those were clearly the top 3 teams in college football last season. And I think this season it's more of the same, except for, Oklahoma maybe instead of Ohio State. But it is just worth noting that number 4 team tends to get blown out every year in the college football playoff, no matter who it is. So, I mean, I think it's going to be those top 3 teams. Is there one that sticks out to you as the most likely to win it all? Because obviously it can depend on the seeding. As we saw, the number 3 team last season, Ohio State, probably on par with the number 2 team Clemson, who they beat.
Yeah, I like Oklahoma to kind of take the 1 seed over Alabama just because I think they're going to cruise through their schedule in a very, very convincing fashion. And just kind of like touch on what you were talking about with like the 1-4 thing. That's what kind of makes me feel like the college football playoff, that as big of a marketing tool as it is, it's kind of not really serving that much more of a purpose than to just correct the fact when it was the BCS championship. Usually the number one team in the country that was pretty solid. Usually it's, if it's a blowout, okay, they got it wrong with the 2-3. If it's a close game, they got it right with 1-2. You know what I'm saying? So the
Right.
playoff is almost serving as a way of just kind of like papering over the committee's potential mistake in misseeding two of the teams at the top. It's never really been about, oh, like a 4 seed can win it. Although I think they did 1 year, if I remember correctly, there was a 4 seed that
I
won
think
the
it was Ohio
championship.
State with
Right. Oh,
Ezekiel Elliott, and I think they upset Alabama. That might have been it.
absolutely. I think that
2016, I
I think
think.
that was the year that they actually like they had a super tough schedule. Like they lost to Penn State or something like that, and they made it in still. But like it's not like that's why when I hear the call of, hey, let's make it an 8-team playoff, to my mind, it's like, well, for what purpose? Because it's not as if
To
an
make
eight
money.
seed. Yeah, it's like that's why I actually prefer the bowl system to the college football playoff, because with March Madness you have the one and done tournament. That's completely different from anything that the NBA does. College football, I think the bowl system itself is pretty special on its own, and NFL can handle playoffs because those are professionals. They're more evenly matched on a week to week basis. So I actually kind of prefer a little bit of a reversion, if you will, to this sort of thing, or maybe just have a football playoff that's outside of the bowl system, because it's kind of weird to be like, hey, we won the Sugar Bowl, but we lost in the championship game or whatever it is. I'm going a little bit off the rails on this one, but that just kind of, defines the point that, usually they get, 1 and 2 pretty consistently right. It's just between 2 and 3 where that mix up can happen. So that's all I have to say about that, to quote Forrest Gump.
Yeah, I like it. I love Forrest Gump. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I don't know. I like it because we get a chance to see extra football, and I'm always
Mhm.
a fan of extra football. And I think these matchups could get better. I think they've also had some bad luck, but I don't know. I'm very conflicted about it. About whether we should do more or less, because I think by doing more, we do get to see more different teams. It's sort of more excitement. I don't know how much of it is going to be close competitive football, but I mean, it doesn't hurt. I know that I think what is it? They're going to go to a 12-team playoff with buys. I think we were talking about possibly in a
Something like
couple of
that.
years. So we'll see what happens. But just real quickly, who do you think is going to win it all? I don't know if I got an official school.
I'll just go with Oklahoma then. I'll go with
Okay.
Oklahoma winning it all in a bit of an upset. I know that they're going to seem a little bit weak coming out of the Big 12, but I think they have the quarterback, and I think they're going to be able to just, do enough to upset.
Yeah, I think, and then we saw that, in the bowl game last season, they beat Florida 55-20, I think it was. Now, Florida had a few guys like Kyle Pitts,
Oh,
I
more
think
than a few.
Tony. Yeah, they had a lot of guys who opted out of that game. But still, nonetheless, Florida has depth to win by 35 is pretty good. I was going to say Alabama, but then I thought about it, and it's hard. It's hard to win every season. We haven't had a repeat champ since Alabama in 2011 and
Hmm.
2012. So it's been a while. We haven't had it in the playoff format either, where you got to win 2 in a row. So I'm gonna go with like a really like sort of like funny trend and like things that happen. So humor me here a little bit, but in
Okay.
2015, Alabama won the championship. Who won after Alabama in 2016?
That
Can
was
you guess?
Clemson with Deshaun Watson, right?
Correct. Then in 2017, Alabama won the championship. Who won next year?
So after that,
2018.
well, that was Clemson again with Trevor Lawrence.
And who won last year?
Alabama. So you're going to go with a new quarterback in Clemson to win it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I like Clemson's quarterback. I'm just very
Hmm.
high on him because I think what he did in his second career start last season at Notre Dame to put up over 400 yards, not to have any turnovers. They lost that game because his teammates had 3 fumbles and their running game struggled. And I think he's getting that receiver back that Trevor Lawrence didn't have last season, that missed missed all of last year with an injury. So I just really like what he's doing for Clemson. I think certainly between Clemson and Alabama and Oklahoma, neither one of those 3 teams would surprise me. I think it's one of those games where, they play a 7-game, they play 100 games, they each might win 50. It's that close.
Sure.
It's that given day. But I do think, given the track record of Dabo Swinney in these playoff games, Clemson's really been the only school to beat Alabama consistently. I like him as a coach. I like Nick Saban even more, but I like Clemson's quarterback the most, even though he's not the favorite. Oklahoma's quarterback's the favorite to win the Heisman. But there's something about Clemson and what they do and how good they are. And I think they're not going to be as beat up because they're going to play an easier schedule than Alabama, probably an even easier schedule than Oklahoma in that weak conference. So it could go either way, but I would take Clemson to be different. We'll both go with an upset. Neither one of us is going to pick Alabama. How about that? So no chalk there. It is worth noting that Alabama is losing Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, who again missed most of last season anyways, but Mac Jones, Najee Harris. So they're losing their top running back, their top 2 receivers. They also lost, I think, their top 2 linemen, who also got drafted, I believe, in the first round. They had, 2 guys in the top 10. I think they had like 4 in the top 15 and maybe like 6 in the first round, something like that. I mean, they're losing a lot of players. They're going to reboot, reload. Their quarterback is going to be a lot like Jalen Hurts, their new guy, young, kind of a dual threat quarterback. But I think I like Clemson's passing attack more. And that's kind of what wins these days in college football, too. It used to be where you can win with the dual threat quarterback. And I'm not saying you still can't. But you look at the last few national champions, you take a look at Mac Jones, you take a look at Tua, you look at Joe Burrow. All of those guys, well, maybe not Mac Jones. Tua and Burrow can run a little bit, but they're more traditional passing quarterbacks. And even Trevor Lawrence, who won, also can run, but again, a little bit more traditional passing quarterback. Nick Saban himself said it. The game has changed. The game has changed. You don't win with defense and running the ball anymore. That's why Alabama's getting all these top receiver recruits. I just think that Clemson's quarterback is going to be a better passer than any of these other quarterbacks. So I like Clemson to win it all.
Absolutely. Well, moving from college football into the pros, the players have spoken. The NFL Network's top 100 players list has been released. Thoughts on the top 10, maybe if somebody should be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and then also touching on, kind of like in conjunction with this list, who we think the best non-quarterback player is in the NFL. Common, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll hit on the top 10 first, and then I'll have you hit on the top 10, and then I guess we can talk about the player. My first thought is, where is Stephon Diggs? I know he's number 11 on this list, so I mean, he's just outside of the top 10.
Asked and answered.
Right, but he led the NFL in receiving yards last season. And there's 2 receivers on this list ranked ahead of him. I know DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams are amazing players. I know Adams had the most touchdowns. But Stephon Diggs, to me, is, if we're going to rank a receiver 8th and 6th, he should at least be in the top 10. I struggle between those 3 and also Tyreek Hill. Like, I don't know that there's one clear top receiver, which, by the way, Tyreek Hill is another name. But if those 2 receivers will be in the top 10, I think Stephon Diggs also belongs in the top 10. Who would I take out? That's a really hard question, but probably TJ Watt if I had to, because I look at Josh Allen at number 10. I also thought he was underseeded. We know quarterback is the most important position in the NFL. He was the 3rd best QB in the NFL without question last season. He was phenomenal. We know he has all the tools. So I thought he'd be ranked a little bit higher. I like Mahomes at number 1. We'll get to the top position player in a little bit. So I'll kind of talk about where that guy comes from, because he's underseeded in his own way, and it's not who you think it is. Actually, you might guess it, but It's not
Hmm.
the prototypical, like, who is the best ranked player, not a QB. I think it's not that guy. Not making much sense here, but you'll find out. But I do think, though, it's interesting to see Tom Brady at number 7. Clearly, the players still respect Tom Brady.
Mhm.
I respect him. I think that's a fair spot for him. He's not even in your top 5 quarterbacks, Tom, but the players have him at number 7. I thought that was interesting. And I think certainly Patrick Mahomes at number 1 comes at no surprise. I think Aaron Donald, number 2, Aaron Rodgers, number 3, Derrick Henry, number 4, Travis Kelce, number 5. I think they got the top 5 players right. I do think they have their order wrong. But
No,
what's your first impressions?
I think I know where you're going with that. Well, first off, I defer to all NFL players and the legend that is Tom Brady as far as the top lists go. I don't really have any complaints with the top 10. I think, it's interesting that you have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs kind of like right next to each other. Not kind of, they literally are right next to each other on this list. I believe Stephon Diggs was 43rd last year, and Josh Allen, I think, was 87 as I'm clicking around to find that out. I think maybe 77. Oh,
I
no,
think
he
it was
rose
87.
up. He rose up 77 spots. That means Stephon Diggs was somewhere down in the 50s. I think they just kind of like rose up together because we saw Stephon Diggs was a good receiver in Minnesota become a great receiver in Buffalo. And then Josh Allen went from a middle of the pack kind of quarterback, somebody who obviously makes plays with his legs, but still questionable decisions. And we saw a massive, massive leap in his completion percentage. So I think
They
that's
complete
kind
each
of
other.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a nod to. So I don't really have an issue. You could really flip, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs in terms of saying almost like who made who better in this case. Is having a bona fide number 1 receiver what made Josh Allen, or is having the opportunity to be a number 1 receiver because you had, remember, Adam Thielen in Minnesota and Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. Was that holding Stephon Diggs back a little bit and having just like a full bore potential top quarterback in Josh Allen making that happen? As far as the rest of the list goes, I mean, I don't really have any sort of complaints on how the players made the decisions as far as the top 10 goes. So do you want me to like kind of guess who the best player is that's not a quarterback? Do you want me to just kind of like give my thoughts on that first? How do you want to tackle the next portion of this topic?
Let's do both. Let's hear your thoughts, and then you can guess who you think I rank the best non-quarterback player.
Okay, so we're going to do one on offense, one on defense, and I'm actually going to touch on both of them, and I think I know which one you're talking about. As far as a player goes, it's hard to say that Aaron Donald is underrated at 2 on this list, given Patrick Mahomes is a clear number 1. But, I mean, Aaron Donald was a player that when he was drafted, I remember I was listening to 670 The Score, great AM station for sports talk radio, the first all sports talk radio station in Chicago, the flagship station of the Chicago Cubs when they won their World Series, the White Sox when they won their World Series. They have the Chicago Bulls as well now. I listened to the draft, and I heard the Rams draft Aaron Donald 1, maybe 2 picks before the Bears got Kyle Fuller, a decent pick in their own right. But I was actually disappointed that he did not fall. I was really excited of him coming out of Pitt. It is incredible at 6 feet tall what he has been able to do at the defensive tackle position. Typically, you're thinking of some big, burly 6'4", 6'5" guy who weighs hundreds upon hundreds of pounds. And Aaron Donald just does it with hard work, with leverage, with just outstanding play. And he's even triple teamed. So the way that he has impacted game plans from the middle of the defense, ostensibly the easiest place to double team because you've got guards and centers in there. You don't have to do like a halfback or a tight end chip. He's still able to wreck game plans up the middle. As far as the other player who I think is best player in the NFL, not a quarterback, not on defense, I'm going to go Travis Kelce. It's my opinion that tight end is the most difficult position outside of the quarterback to learn, simply because you have to know your pass block or your run blocking exceptionally well. And now tight ends are called upon to be outstanding athletes. You've got 2 type of tight end positions. You've got the block tight end and the move tight end. Travis Kelce can do it all. So I think, at 5, I'd probably put him at 3 on the list, given that Mahomes 1, Aaron Donald 2. I'd put Travis Kelce right at 3. I know Aaron Rodgers had a fantastic season, but given all that Kelce is and all that he can do, and how even at he's 31 years old, something like that, that he's still by far and away the best tight end. I know, Kittle's pretty good, and that other tight ends are moving on up with as they develop in the league. But Kelsey still is just an outstanding offensive player. So those are my two non-quarterbacks that I think are the best in the league. I'm going to guess that yours was Kelsey, and your expression is telling me I may be onto something there.
Yeah, you're right. Of course, you know me. It's Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is an absolute superstar. First off, just the top five, I would actually put Aaron Rodgers at number 2, just because the quarterback position is the most important.
Sure.
I think he's a phenomenal player. I think Aaron Donald is hands down the top defensive player. I don't have a problem with calling him the top defensive player, but I'd put Aaron Donald at number 4. I'd put Travis Kelce at number 3. Then Derrick Henry can be number 5. I think you look at Henry, Donald, and Kelce. All three are phenomenal players. They're all doing phenomenal things. They're all incredible at their position. I do think Derrick Henry could be even a little bit better of a pass catcher. But as good as Derrick Henry and Aaron Donald are, and they are that good, neither one of them is setting records at their position in terms of all-time rushing record, all-time sacks record. Neither one of these guys is doing that. Travis Kelce last season broke the receiving yards record for a tight end, 1,416 receiving yards. No tight end ever has had that much. So he is literally the best ever at his position. And he didn't even play the last game of the season. He actually finished second in the NFL in receiving yards as a tight end, despite having Tyreek Hill, another elite target on his team. You talk about Stephon Diggs in Minnesota. Yeah, he was slowed down. They had Thielen. They also had Kyle Rudolph, a good tight end. They also were a running team. So he was losing some of his production there. But Travis Kelce has Tyreek Hill on his team, and he's still second in receiving yards. He didn't play week 17. It would have been hard, but possible if he had a big game that he would have actually had the most receiving yards in the NFL had he played week 17. He's very smart player. Mahomes has said this. I read a great article about it, how Travis Kelce, when Mahomes ad-libs, he knows exactly where he needs to be, which is often a lost art in sports. Just the knowledge it takes to play some of these positions. You think of like a physical, strong athlete guy as the key to the positions, but there is some intelligence involved, and Kelce is one of the most intelligent guys. I also think it's interesting that as great as Tyreek Hill is, and Tyreek Hill is great, but when the Chiefs are really in trouble, Mahomes goes to Kelce. You look at that last drive against the Raiders in the regular season last year, their late comeback, he went to Kelce. You look at the game in 2020 against the Texans when they were down 24-0. I actually covered that game. I was there in person. One of the coolest sporting events I've ever been to. Travis Kelce had like 10 catches and 3 touchdowns that game. So when things get in trouble for the Chiefs, he's the guy Mahomes goes to. So I think to me, Kelce is a little bit more dominant than Aaron Donald at his position. I do know that Donald is a tackle, so if he was an end, it'd be a little easier to get sacks, as you mentioned, with the double teams. But I think that he's just not quite as dominant. And I know QB pressure is an important stat. It really is. But if you think about it in a game, like your average defensive lineman, like a really, really good one like him, he might get 1 sack a game. And that's not to say that he won't disrupt the quarterback 4 to 5 times. He won't force some double teams. But Kelce has the ability to get 7, 8, 9 catches in a game. And he makes it so hard to cover him. He opens up the game for his teammates. Again, I know Donald does that too with the double teams, but I think it's a little bit more so evident with Kelce. And he blocks, as you said. So I think Travis Kelce, to me, is the best at his position. And really, I might put him at number 2 if we're talking about overall players. I just give Aaron Rodgers a slight edge just because, as I'm talking about him being more important than the defensive lineman, I'd say the quarterback is the most important. So that's why I put Rodgers ahead of him. But I think it's a pretty solid list overall. I just think Kelce deserves a little bit more love. Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen also.
Absolutely. Yeah. A great way to kind of like think about that going forward is if you were to take this player out and just put replacement level player in, what happens to that team's scheme and overall talent? I think the Chiefs would still have a pretty good offense, but without everything that he does, both from a production standpoint and even just like a schematic standpoint and what his skill set allows everyone else around him to do. And then on the flip side with Aaron Donald, we're looking at the Rams defense as being one of the better defenses, one of the best defenses in the league the past couple of years. What happens if he's not in the middle? I think a lot of other people end up coming up short in those systems. So I think, the players, they know what they're talking about. I think they got the list pretty well right going forward for that. So it'll be interesting to see just a couple of weeks from opening week.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add on Travis Kelce. Sometimes people talk about the Chiefs having an embarrassment of riches, but if you you take a look at it, it's really Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. I'm not saying those other guys aren't good, but a guy like McCole Hardman is a lot more like a speed guy, like Devin Hester was. Hardman actually has a lot of drops, and he's a fast guy. If he was your number one receiver, he can be taken out of games because his route running, his catching ability, his strength, he's not there in certain areas. So he's great because of, Kelce and Hill. I think, same thing for Jamarcus Robinson, even Sammy Watkins, who I think left the team, but Watkins has been hurt. He's not the same player he used to be. A lot of those guys are made better by Mahomes, Hill, and Kelce. Yes, Mahomes has Hill and Kelce. He's lucky. But I think those guys, the other players, the other offensive talent around them gets way too much credit, I think. And that's because they make them look good. Because if you double team Kelce and Hill, someone's going to be one-on-one, like, a fast guy one-on-one with the safety. Yeah, I take the fast guy. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the NFL season. Just a couple real quick notes. I know I didn't want to talk about it because we've talked about it a lot on the show, but Teddy Bridgewater wins the quarterback job for the Broncos. Our alma mater, Drew Lock, coming out second. Jameis Winston wins it for the Saints. Very impressive showing late in the preseason for him. And then it still looks like none of the rookies will start except for maybe Mac Jones. I don't know if Bill Belichick has named his official starter yet, but I'm looking forward to that. And Joe Burrow played for the first time in like forever in their final preseason game, getting a series in. So hopefully he's healthy. And in the college football segment, I know I forgot to mention this, but Alabama and Miami playing this week. I think we've got a couple of Big Ten matchups, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana. So a lot of really good football to look forward to. Next week, we'll be making our NFL preseason predictions as to who we think makes the Super Bowl and wins it all. I think you won't be surprised with my pick for Super Bowl champion. Probably not. But I am like baffled over here thinking about the NFC. I still don't know who to pick, so we'll see.
I think I have a pretty decent idea of who might be coming out of there, but let's talk about some baseball pennant races coming up. We touched on the American League last week with the White Sox, Yankees, Rays, and Astros as being the primary teams. Now we shift over to the National League, where the Dodgers are pretty much by far and away the favorite, but they're certainly not alone. Even within their division, San Francisco Giants have had an outstanding year and just won't go away. The Padres have fallen off the pace, but still have a lot of talent. And then you have teams like the Brewers and the Reds out of the Central Division that are vying for playoff spots and divisional crowns. And then out in the East, I don't even know what's going on in the East. That just seems to be all over the place with these teams. It's been the Mets for a while. It's been the Braves. I think the Phillies for a hot minute were the team. But I don't know. Who do you think is the best teams besides the Dodgers, or maybe we should phrase it as the biggest threat to the Dodgers for winning the National League pennant this year?
Sure. I think there's probably two, maybe three teams I think of. First off, I think the Giants are the real deal. I think realistically, they're probably the biggest threat. I mean, they have a better record. They're 2.5 games ahead of the Dodgers. I'm not convinced that they're going to hold on to that. I do think LA might surpass them here in this last month. But I like what the Giants are doing. They're second in ERA. They're first in saves with Jake McGee and Tyler Rogers, which shows me that they can win close games. They're first in home runs. So, as they say, chicks dig the long ball. The analytics dig the long ball, and the Giants can certainly hit home runs. Their only issue is if they don't hit enough home runs, Can they score enough? I mean, they're 9th in runs scored. They're 10th in average, 11th in on base. Certainly not shabby, but not really, amazing. I do like their great starting pitching with Kevin Gausman leading the way, great relievers, and they're a top 5 defense. So I think the Giants are for real. I know, it's been a few years back since they won, but that's like a winning franchise. You put on the Giants uniform, you expect to win. They added Chris Bryant from the Cubs, a guy who has won the World Series. So the Giants, I think, are a legitimate contender. I like the Dodgers more because they're just a little bit better lineup and maybe even better starting pitching. But as far as a couple other teams, I think the Padres have a chance if they can put it all together. I know Tatis Jr. has missed some time with injuries, has hurt them. Manny Machado is a great player. Eric Hosmer, speaking of guys who have won in the World Series, he's a good bat. I think the guy that the Padres really have to get right is Blake Snell. He's been one of the most disappointing players in baseball. I looked this up, a 4.58 ERA, the worst of his career. This is a guy who won the Cy Young a few years ago, got over 20 wins, had an ERA under 2. He's a guy who pitched really well in last season's playoffs. And then Yu Darvish at 3.80 ERA. He struggled the second half. He can do better. So if they can get their starters in order, they have a chance. But ultimately, I don't think they're a threat because they're a game and a half back of the Reds. They may not even make the playoffs. And if they make it as a wild card, they'll probably lose to the Giants or Dodgers in the one-game scenario. But that's what's crazy. You've got the 2 best teams in baseball, arguably, and they're going to have to play in a one-game scenario. So that system doesn't sound really fair now. I get why they would put it in. Maybe they can change it where it's like the 2 teams with the worst records to make the playoffs. But I really don't like that system.
Yeah, I don't either because it takes exactly what you're saying, a team that has put together a phenomenal regular season. And to just touch on the Giants briefly, baseball is the one sport where you can truly be what your record says that you are. 162 games. There is no hiding. There's no puck luck. There are no lucky bounces. The game is the game and your record's your record. I think that it's a shame that the Giants are going to have to play in a one-game playoff because MLB decided, hey, this is a great way to capitalize on some, late season theatrics and just some exciting baseball. I prefer the 4-team model just because if you win 95 games without winning the division, well, you should still be able to have a full 5-game series heading into the playoffs. So I think that it absolutely should change. As far as kind of like the threats to the Dodgers, I think the Giants are a pretty obvious one. I mean, I'm saying this next statement with the assumption that the Dodgers are going to catch the Giants in the division. Giants might not make it out of one game. That's the shame of it all, is that you have one opportunity to audition, I guess, for a tournament, which is what the playoffs are. And as far as who wins the World Series doesn't determine the best team in baseball. That just determines the winner of the playoff tournament, basically. The overall record in the MLB season is what determines who the best team is. As far as a threat to win the World Series outside of LA, I actually kind of like the Brew Crew, the neighbors up north in Milwaukee. There could just be something in the water where, Tampa had it last year with a number of teams, or Florida as a state had a number of teams vying for championships. I think Wisconsin might have that this year with Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta. We're talking, best 4 out of 7 series here. And when you have 3 phenomenal starting pitchers like that, and then you have top-end relievers like Devin Williams with his airbender changeup and Josh Hader with just electric fastball, wipeout slider. Those are tough teams to beat when pitching is clicking on all cylinders. As a 05 White Sox fan, I might know a thing or two about that. You can win a World Series with a score of 1-0. It's happened before and could very well happen again. I think the Brew Crew is probably the dark horse threat to come out of the National League to win the pennant for them. So it'll be interesting to see.
I also had the Brewers written down, actually. So I had several teams written down, got through the first few, and I that's the other one that I hadn't hit on yet. I think what you said is spot on. I think Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, by the way, 2.38 and 2.30 ERA respectively. Those are two aces. You talked about the relievers, Josh Hader, as unsavory as a person he might be
Mm-hmm.
off the field and on social media. He is an incredible closer, a lefty that legitimately throws near 100 miles per hour. He's like Aroldis Chapman, but I think he has more pitches than Chapman probably. So he's really, really good. So for them, the question mark is, can they hit enough? They're 10th in runs scored. Again, that's not bad, but it's not necessarily in the top 5. But I do think Christian Yelich, a guy who's played through injuries this season, a guy who's, an MVP level player if he's right, if they get him going, that should help the lineup. I think in a short game series, having 2 or 3 pitchers really does help you, and that matters. And that's where the Dodgers could be in trouble. We don't know what's going to happen with Clayton Kershaw. Does he come back healthy? Trevor Bauer, I still think, is in an extended absence leave even longer. So if they're with Kershaw and Bauer, they're a heavy favorite. But all of a sudden, if they're without Kershaw and Bauer, I know they still have Scherzer, they still have Urias, Walker Buehler. Those guys are still really, really good, but it does hurt them. And you mentioned as far as the one-game playoff, the Dodgers could still be in that playoff themselves. And we just saw them lose back-to-back games against the Rockies at home. And the Rockies don't win anything on the road. So it's baseball, it's sports. Anything can happen. I think in the last 10 years, I believe last season's Dodgers and the Cubs in 2016, I think, are the only 2 teams in the last 10 years that have the best regular season record and win the World Series. And you talk about something cooking in Milwaukee. Well, the Bucks just won the championship in Milwaukee. So there might be something in the water. I know we had Tampa Bay winning all those, the Lightning, the Bucks, the Rays almost winning. Who else won in Tampa Bay? Or was it just those 2? I can't even I think someone else won. I mean, it's just something.
Well, Miami was in the NBA finals in the bubble finals.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean,
So
I don't know.
that.
Maybe there's something cooking in Milwaukee this season. I mean, I think it's pretty wide open. And you said, baseball is a different game. It's who's hot now, and you can get lucky in a 7-game series. You can't get lucky over 162. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a wide open playoffs. And the Dodgers have been weird. They have one of those deals where they have some games where they blow teams out by 10, 15 runs, and then they lose to a bad team or have a close game. And it comes to it being hard to repeat. It's really, really hard to repeat as a champion in any sport. It's so, so rare. We see it most often in basketball because I think there's 5 guys on the court and there's so many points scored in a basketball game.
Less variance, yeah.
Right. But in baseball and football, I know we just had it in hockey, Tampa Bay, I think, won 2 in a row. But even in hockey, that's not very typical. Champions League soccer, again, something I think of. Even World Cup, I know it's every 4 years, but it's not like we have the same country winning every time. So I do think if I had to pick between the Dodgers and the field, I might take the field. Now, if I had to pick one team to win it all, I might take the Dodgers. So it'll certainly be interesting. And here in the next, in about a month from now, we'll start talking about the playoffs. Looking forward to that. And this is kind of an exciting time when football is back, and then we have baseball wrapping up, and then basketball starting up in late October. I know March Madness gets a lot of love, but that October, November slate is really, really exciting for the sports schedule.
Absolutely. And talking about, as one season wraps up, another one starts up, we've got our locks of the week that we will be going over. Potentially, we haven't really talked about this much as a show, but, we might be tweaking how we do this. And if we're going to be changing how we're going to be telling locks of the week, if we might go to a point system or something like that, that means we got to wrap up these records, and we'd better do it soon because this show has been fading hard. We have fallen from having 2 players up at the 50% mark. Common, you and I think we went as high as me being a half game ahead for first place, and you most consistently in first place. And we were even up right at 50%, if not a little bit above.
I was up to 4 games over 500.
And since we have fallen to Common and I getting 48.14%. Drew has fallen off to 43.33 repeating percent. So we better find a way to wrap this up and move on to a new system, because I don't know if we're ever going to touch even again at the rates we're going.
I actually think we will. Let's just say
you always think we will, and yet
I'm confident. Well, that's the trick with the 3 games. I think I've been hitting above 50% with some of my sports bets elsewhere, but maybe the locks of the week tend to jinx me. But I feel good about it. I do want to ask you this though, because we'll talk more about the format, but just for the listeners to hype up the drama behind it, and we can change this. We don't have to 100% agree right now, but so are we thinking, like, if say we do stay with the record system that we have, because we're talking about maybe moving to 5 picks where we do 3 NFL, 2 other picks. Are we going to restart like season 2 records? Or if we do stick with the records, are we going to keep going so we see all-time records? Because if we are going to restart new records, then this week is going to decide the champion, because we're tied right now, you and I.
Yeah, this is part of the thing that we need to figure out as far as, what season ends and where a new season begins.
Because I mean, we could also.
I would think that we would start the new one when the NFL starts. So I think that we would have
next
like a
week.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it already?
Yeah. It's like
I thought it started the week after Labor Day.
It does. Next week is the week after Labor Day. Well, I mean, it's Monday, and
next week is
Thursday.
Labor Day, so we would do one more. Oh my God! Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
So this could be the last betting locks before the NFL season starts. Because I'm a little conflicted, because I think on one end, obviously if we go to a point system, we'll definitely restart it. But if we do keep it where we track our records, it could almost be sort of funny to see, assuming we do this show 10 years down the road, which I would like to, what our all-time record on the show is. But then you could also still do it if I track a record of each season. So maybe that's something to talk about, but potentially this could decide who wins season 1 of Locks of the Week this week.
Oh, I picked a bad week to do a bit. Oh man.
What do you mean?
This. Okay, I'm going to roll with it. Well, because it's the first week of college football. It's the first week of college football, so I went with an all college football slate, though we know nothing about college football. So a lot of these are just kind of dart throws. I didn't like the MLB card anyway. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to display some faux confidence heading into what very well could be the last week of season 1. And then, we'll have to talk it out with Drew as well, what we want to do for season 2, and kind of finalize that. I think the point system might be a little bit nicer. I think it might be easier to track than overall wins and losses, because we had some hiccups with that.
Yeah, but we have the records now. We've got them on track.
That's true.
We'll talk about it. I actually just want to be over 500. I'm so close. So that's why I almost want to finish the season over 500. But last week did mean, actually, let me real quickly recap last week. I didn't even hit it. I had the Cubs over the Rockies, the Cubs winning 6-4. That was actually an interesting game because they had a rally in that game. They hit like a 2-run homer, a walk-off shot. And I think they scored like 3 in the 9th, or 3 in the 8th, 2 in the 9th. You actually had the first 5 innings Cubs.
I got cute on that.
You lost on the Cubs. I won on the Cubs. I had A's over Mariners, the Mariners winning 5-3. And this is another example of just how do things happen in sports. Astros minus 1.5 over the Royals winning 7-1. Just a jack pitching matchup. The Royals had like some guy whose ERA was in like 6 something. And the Astros had Zach Greinke at home. And that's what happened yesterday. The Rockies beat the Dodgers. That's why I say I have better luck when I'm not just doing 3 picks if you're doing more bets during the week. But just a crazy, crazy upset for the Royals. You and I both had that game. And then you had the Cubs first 5 innings. You missed that one. And then you got the Red Sox minus 1.5 over the Twins. That was actually a wild game. It ended 11-9. I think the Red Sox were losing. Then they came back, took the lead, and then it got close again. So that was interesting. And then Drew Brackett had one of the all-time bad beats, and he probably doesn't even know what happened. It was the Udinese Venezia Serie A game. He had under 2.5 goals, 93rd minute. The 3rd goal comes in stoppage time, last minute of the game. And then he he got the Mariners over the A's 5-3, and we had a historic moment. He missed an EPO under Southampton, Newcastle under 2.5. It was 0-0 at the half. Somehow a 4-goal explosion in the second half. Could not have foreseen that coming. But we'll let you roll with your college football because we'll know my record by the end of tonight. So we'll know what you have to do. By the way, if we do tie, I think we'll definitely do one more next week to be a tiebreaker. We may have to do like where we pick like one of the same games or something just to make sure it's something different. But you go ahead, Tom. Let's hear what you think about college football. I hope you're picking Clemson, or actually I hope you're not picking Clemson, since I think Clemson will cover.
No, I'm staying away from that game. First, though, I'll give you Drew's picks for the week that he texted in as he is out. So Portugal, Ireland for soccer, I'm assuming over 2.5 goals. Faroe Islands, Israel, under 2.5 goals. And then Latvia and Gibraltar, under 2.5 goals. So I don't know what sporting event this is for.
It's World Cup qualifiers in Europe, and I think it's Latvia. His spelling is just bad. He misspelled Latvia, but that's okay because we both got that message. And it is interesting to note that as well as Drew does under EPL unders, last summer or this summer, what last summer? It was this summer, just a couple months ago. We were picking the Euros for soccer, and his European Championship picks were horrendous. I'm not sure that he got one right. So I looked at those those over-unders in my head. It's just like I'm a huge soccer nut. I know a lot about soccer. I know a lot about the players. But I cannot name anyone on Latvia or Israel or some of these other countries. So the first thought that comes to mind, it's like, yeah, that'll be under the total. And then you have Portugal, obviously, has a lot of talent. So they might go over. So my first thought is 3-0 week for Drew. But then again, I thought about that, his European Championship picks haven't been going very well. But let's hear your college football.
All right. So I am going along with James Taylor on this one. I have a lot of Carolina on my mind. I'm going with the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover 5.5 on the road at Virginia Tech. Sam Howell, I think, is a dark horse Heisman candidate, and they're going to have their offense absolutely roaring. Virginia Tech, a tough place to play for sure, and North Carolina's defense isn't outstanding, but I like the Tar Heels to put up a bunch of points in this one and win by more than a touchdown. Staying in the great state of North Carolina, I'm going with NC State. I'm doing something I don't often do. I'm going to have them covering 18 points over South Florida. South Florida, I believe, was 1-8 last season, a bit of a rebuilding program. So give me NC State. I believe they're returning quarterback and running back. So that means easy points. And then I've got a tough call to make between 3 picks. Do I go for the juicy juice, a line here of West Virginia on the money line over Maryland? That's at -145. If we're going to be calling this and I want the win, I might go for that one. But I'll be bold. I will go for the underdog. I will go for the Fresno State Bulldogs to cover 20.5 points against Oregon. Oregon has a new quarterback coming in. They're going to be installing an offense. Fresno State actually played against UConn last week. And while UConn not very good, Fresno won 45-0. So I think that's a little bit of a tune-up, something where I don't anticipate Fresno State to win the game by any stretch, but they'll keep it within 3 touchdowns. That's a pretty big number to cover for a big school program, or a big enough school program like Fresno State. So that's what I will go with. I got a couple big numbers and then a medium number.
What was the number again on that last one?
20.5 for Fresno State to cover against Oregon. I'm going to have West Virginia laying 18, State covering.
I got to tell you about that that Oregon and Fresno State game. That's one of those games where pay attention to the extra points, because a missed PAT here or there may decide the line. Just like when I see that 20.5 and I think 3 touchdowns, it's like, maybe someone goes for 2, someone misses the PAT.
Sure.
Because I think that line is probably right about where it should be. Like, again, I don't know that much about Fresno State football. I do know that Oregon, I think, appears to be really, really good this season. And Fresno State did win big last week. So what you're saying kind of makes sense. But I think it's probably going to go down to a PAT. So that'll be fun to track. So you'll be tracking those on Saturday. I'm going to go with an MLB
Friday and
card.
Saturday. I think that they're a mix over the weekend.
Okay, Friday and Saturday. So I went with a baseball card. I have this thing where like sometimes I get antsy and I just want to like know how my picks finish. So like obviously like with NFL, I'll be doing a lot more NFL locks. I do think college football I'll do some, but I would like to see these teams play before I'm guessing at lines, because that's essentially what you're almost doing. I know like your method sounds educated, but it's sort of a guess week one of college football. Obviously MLB, as we saw with the Astros and Royals last week, the Dodgers and Rockies, anything can happen. But I'll take my chances for teams that are deeper into the season. So first off, I'll start with the Rockies and Rangers tonight. I got over 8.5 runs. That's minus 105 on DraftKings. Colorado's German Marquez has a 5.31 ERA on the road this year. Gave up 5 runs over 3 innings against the woeful Cubs offense last week. And then the Rangers have AJ Alexy on the mound. He's making his major league debut for the Rangers. So I know we had the Diamondbacks guy who did really great. I think it was not his debut, his first start. But more times than not, your first start doesn't go as well. And even if it does go well, I think German Marquez for the Rockies might give up enough runs as it is. I mean, the Rangers scored 13 runs yesterday. They're coming off a hot day with those bats against the Astros, who we know are a good pitching team. And then, of course, also the Rockies scoring 5 on the Dodgers yesterday. It was a reliever day for LA. Didn't have one of their aces on the horse, but LA has so many good relievers that 5 runs against them is also impressive. So I think to have 9 or more runs in that game, I feel pretty good about it. So let's see. I had a couple decisions to make too. So I was a little bit split. So let's go with Giants Brewers under 7.5 runs. So to be honest, I was also eyeing the Giants plus 125 because they're at home and that's a juice line. But then I'm like, well, Corbin Burns is a great starter. I'm not going to bet against him. He's got a 2.30 ERA, 1.87 ERA on the road. So instead, I'm going to go for the under 7.5 runs in that game, since I'm not sure who's going to win. Burns, a great pitcher for the Brewers. Johnny Cueto, 3.09 ERA for the Giants this season. He's got a 3.09 ERA at home, a 3.00 ERA in his last 3 starts. The Giants just blanked against the Braves yesterday, and the Brewers' offense has really been struggling of late. They've got only 11 runs over their last 4 games. So 2 really good pitchers, sort of a pitcher's ballpark, a big ballpark there. So look for under 7.5 runs in that one. And then since this could be the deciding week, I've got 2 things written down here. So I'll give you both of them so you see what my choices are. So I've either got Dodgers minus 1.5 over the Braves at minus 105, or I've got Mariners plus 1.5 over the Astros at minus 120. Whew. On paper, both of these bets sound good. I think Urias is on the mound for the Dodgers. He's got an ERA of more than 1 point better than Drew Smyly for the Braves. The Dodgers have lost 2 straight games to the Rockies at home. So you would think that they can't lose 3 in a row. But then again, I haven't had very much luck betting on the Dodgers this year. They've kind of not been very helpful for me. On the other hand, we have the Mariners and Astros. The Astros I haven't had a lot of luck with either. So those 2 teams who are 2 of like the better teams in baseball haven't been very kind to me. So you know what? We're going to bet against the Astros. Forget the Braves. We're going Mariners plus 1.5 over the Astros. Luis Garcia for Houston has a 1.83 ERA at home, but 4.97 on the road. So he's been much worse on the road. That game's in Seattle, of course. And then Luis Garcia, or what pitcher? One of the pitchers. Let's see. I wrote this down wrong. I don't know why I wrote down Luis Garcia twice. But the Mariners pitcher also much better at home than the Astros pitcher in this game. So I like the Mariners covering plus 1.5. Hold on one second here.
Mhm.
I think I wrote down something in my
Is
notes
it
that
Chris
was
Flexen?
is the
Does that
the
sound right?
Mariners pitcher, right? And
Yeah, I
Garcia's
think
for the
so.
Astros, I think.
Pretty
I think,
sure.
let's see. Yeah, Chris Flexen for the Mariners is the pitcher. So Chris Flexen, much better at home than on the road. Luis Garcia, much worse on the road than at home. So I like Seattle at home to cover 1.5. They don't even have to win. Just lose by one or win. Give me Seattle. Now, if the Dodgers happen to win by more than two, and then the Mariners don't cover, I will be very, very upset at that pick. Also, the under on that game is 8.5 at plus 100. I thought that might be a good value bet for under in that game.
Mhm.
And then again, I also consider the Giants straight up over the Brewers. I don't know if you followed the lines regularly, but I think there's been a lot of lines recently that don't really favor the Giants that much. And like, I don't know why Vegas doesn't like the Giants. They've been covering a lot of them. Did not cover yesterday, that's for sure. And I had another one written down, but I'm not going to go with that. I had Padres D-backs under 9 runs on DraftKings. But
Hmm.
but for the official picks, I'll go with Rockies Rangers over 8.5 runs, Giants Brewers under 7.5 runs, and Mariners plus 1.5 over the Astros. So I can't have any ties. We know that. Can you have any ties this week? You had 18.5. What
Yeah,
were your other two
18.
lines?
I had 5.5, 20.5, and then just straight up 18. So I could have a tie, conceivably.
18 is pretty unlikely though.
Pretty unlikely to hit a tie in that. Yeah, I think
Okay.
actually this might be the first time that in picking baseball locks that we've had somebody take the underdog on the run line. So that'll be interesting to see what happens tonight, of course. And then everybody's basically going to be able to look up those results by the time the show is posted and look forward to what I've got coming up on the weekend. So people at home, root whatever way you feel.
Yeah, no
Moving
kidding.
into statements of the week, salutes. Comment, what you got?
So I've got several salutes, and then I know we talked about sort of making it maybe an official segment, but I'll
Oh,
have
wow.
trivia for you also, since as you like to say,
Ooh.
I don't really have anything that I'm like extremely passionate about in terms of a bold statement. So I'll have
Mhm.
several salutes and then trivia for you. So I'll start with my salutes.
Okay.
First off, salute to Lionel Messi making his debut for PSG. There's my favorite soccer player, a
Hmm.
favorite athlete of all time, quite frankly. 25-minute cameo. He hadn't played in a while. Didn't start. It was a road game. Had a few really cool moments while he played, but no goals. They did win 2-0. So weird to see him in not a Barcelona shirt, but also exciting to see him back on the field. And then I got another salute, something that I don't know how much you've watched, but actually my mom and I have been watching quite a bit of, and I watched a little bit with Allie as well. The Paralympics are going on, so salute to the Paralympics. I don't know if you've seen it, but goal ball is a really cool sport where they've got one person in the middle, two people on each side of the net, and they've got like it's people who don't see very well, but I know they've got the glasses too, and
Hmm.
they throw basically like a dodgeball, basically without seeing, and the other three people can't see it, and they try to block it. It's a really exciting sport. Uh, Personally, really cheering on USA wheelchair men's basketball. The head coach is Ron Likens, who's also the head coach of the Mizzou wheelchair basketball team. So I'm very excited for him. And if USA wheelchair basketball does pull out the win, might shoot him a text. I've done a couple feature stories on their athletes. And probably the coolest things I've seen in the Paralympics is Egypt's Ibrahim Hamadu. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I looked it up online. But anyways, Ibrahim is a huge star. He's got no arms, Tom. No arms. Lost it in an accident when he was 10 years old, I believe.
Mm.
No arms. And he plays table tennis. Can you guess how he plays it? Or have you seen this? Because it's
I
sort of
haven't seen
viral.
it. If I had to
Haven't seen
guess, it
it?
would have to
Should.
be with his he holds the paddle in his mouth, right? Like that has to be the thing that
Yes.
makes the most
Yes.
sense.
He holds the paddle in his mouth. And then what's interesting is how he serves it. He like puts the ball like in between his toes and like lets it off with his feet and then hits it with his mouth on the serve. It is absolutely remarkable. And he's not bad. He did
Mhm.
lose his opening match in straight sets, but like one of the games was like 11-9. So he wasn't like, out there getting 1 point. He competed, kept it close. It's a second Paralympics. Also was in the 2016 Paralympics. Just a really, really cool to do that. I mean, it's just incredible how he's essentially playing, in against, elite level players. Granted, they've got their own disabilities, but they're all playing with their arms. He's
Mhm.
playing with his mouth. Wildly impressive. I suggest you look up the video on YouTube
For sure.
after the show. So that's my salute. Salute to Messi. Salute to the Paralympics, which wrap up next Sunday. They aren't on NBC, but they are on each night on NBC Sports Network. So check that out. I think they're typically on from like 7 o'clock to about 2, 3 a.m. And I think all the events are live actually, or most of them are, with how the timing works out. There was also a few really cool cyclists that won, people who had no arms and no legs, and they were somehow cycling. That's an interesting thing to watch. So shout out to the Paralympic athletes. And Bulgaria, by the way, Tom, 3 athletes in the Paralympics, 2 silver medals. How's that ratio for you? Doing pretty
Pretty
good.
excellent. That's a
Pretty
very
excellent.
nice ratio, and congrats
But
to your home countrymen on that.
yeah, and China's leading the medal count, but America and Great Britain also doing well. But as far as trivia, I've
Mhm.
got some fun trivia for you today. Also, a shout out to my best high school friend, Sam Zucker. I celebrated my birthday with him a month later since we were both been busy. He got me Ultimate Chicago Bears trivia book. So that might be something that I pull out a question for you another time. But
That'll be fun.
I have a themed question when it comes to college football, and this is one that I didn't even know the answer to. So you may struggle with this one,
I'm
but
definitely going to struggle. College
I
football is not my forte.
it's not your forte, like
Mhm.
Matt Forte.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Went to
Well,
Tulane, by the way. Got that one.
yes. Two-part question.
Okay.
And you might be able to guess this just in terms of just thinking powerhouse college football programs. So, what college
Okay.
has the record for most consecutive wins in college football, and how many wins are they? And I'll tell you this, it's not a team. This was, yeah, I mean, it would have been before our parents were born, I believe.
Okay. So that
Unless
leads
I'm
me to
grossly
think.
like, unless your parents are much older than my guesstimate is, but I don't think
No,
they
I'm
are.
guessing. Okay, so that tells me like it has to be something like either Oklahoma or Nebraska. Or there's
Hmm.
like the two that come to my mind.
Okay, okay.
So okay, so that makes me sound like I'm on the right track.
You might be. Hold on, let me pull it out. Let me tell you the years. Not that this might not help you that much, but 1953 to 1957.
The year 1957 did stick out in my head. The problem is they both have the same colors, and that's
Hmm.
what is going to throw me. And it's going to trip me. I'm going to.
Bud Wilkinson was the coach. If that does
That
anything
helps
for
me
you.
not at all. No, I'm going to stick my
Okay.
foot in the ground and say that it's Oklahoma. Then, right?
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Awesome.
Going with the gut feeling. Did
Mm-hmm.
I mention the number, or do you want to guess how many wins in a row it was?
Well, if it's from a 4-year period, it probably has to be something around like 55, 56 wins, something like that.
Less
I
than
don't,
that.
Less than I don't know how many games they played. I'm thinking like they played an 11 game schedule, but if it was that long ago, it's probably somewhere like 8 to 10 games in the season. So somewhere like 43, maybe.
47.
Okay, right in the middle.
You want to hear a fun fact?
Sure.
The 47th win. Can you guess where it was?
Just like at what location or against a
Yeah.
specific school?
Well, both. Sure.
I
You might
mean,
get this since I'm asking, since it's a fun fact.
well, I mean, it's more or less a 50% answer that it's at home in Oklahoma, but that leads me to think that that's not so fun of a trivia question.
Think it's not at home. Their first loss,
Is
actually,
it in the Rose Bowl?
no, they actually lost the following week to Notre Dame 7-0, a home game. And then that actually wasn't even in a bowl game.
Oh,
They
okay.
lost to Notre Dame in the regular season scheduled game. 7-0 to no, Notre
Huh.
Dame was their loss, but what was their 47th straight win? What
I'm just
team
gonna go
and
based
where?
on a rivalry. I'm gonna say it was at Texas, horns down,
It was in
15-yard penalty.
15-yard penalty. Taunting. You can't put that horns down sign, which is ridiculous, by the
I
way.
know.
But no, against Columbia, Missouri, against our alma mater, the Mizzou
Oh wow,
Tigers. So Mizzou tends to be on the wrong end of
that's
some
a
history.
that's a fitting footnote, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So Columbia, Missouri was where they got their 47th win. Again, Mizzou had that heartbreaking loss against Nebraska too, which is a historic game.
Mhm.
But guess what? They got revenge on Oklahoma. 2010 homecoming. I think was that your
And we got
freshman year? It was my sophomore year.
that was the freshman year. That was where everybody stormed the field, but we were too high up to do so because we were forced to move out of wherever we were in the student section, and nobody ever gave us satisfactory answers to why. We were college kids. We didn't have like
Sure.
rights or anything like that. We thought about going, and rushing the field as well, but by the time we even had like the ability to do so, the field was already packed, and we were just like, let's just go back to the dorm.
If you heard the story, and I wish Drew Brackett was here for this, our co-host who's out today.
Mhm.
Have you heard the story
Yeah,
of
you
that
guys were on
game?
air for like forever and a half. Like it was almost a
Yes.
literal eternity where you guys just did post game
Well,
because
okay,
nobody switched it off at the station at KCOU or something like that,
correct.
right?
So here's what happened. So Drew Brackett was at the game.
Hmm.
Like as a fan, I was doing play-by-play
Yeah.
for KCOU, the student radio station. And if you remember, that was a long football game. Obviously, it was the ABC Saturday night of the game, like extra ads, like extra long halftime show, extra long pregame show for us too, because it's such a big game. So I was with Vinny Duber. I don't know if you ever knew him. I don't know what happened with Vinny Duber career-wise. I do remember he had a very good voice.
Hang on. Vinny Duber, like, did he have like long hair and a mustache? Because I think that he covers the White Sox for like NBC or The Athletic or something like that. I'm going to look this
Really?
up now. Yeah, he's like a big deal. Yeah,
Are
NBC
you
Sports
sure?
Chicago.
Well, I guess you can't show. Can you show me his photo if you pull him up on your phone? Do you have your phone handy?
Hang on.
Here, I'll look him up on my phone.
I can send it to you in the Zoom chat.
Oh, yeah.
Or yeah,
Okay.
you have the internet at your fingertips.
Yeah, Vinny Duber.
Yeah, like
Hold on.
is that the guy?
Did you send it in the chat?
Hang on, let me pull this
I'm
down.
look him up.
Chat.
Does it say if
Unknown.
he's a Mizzou grad?
I could check that.
Oh, I think that's him. I think that's him. Wow. How about that? Well, nonetheless, he's made it a little bit more big time than I have. But
I would
congrats
say, like, covering the White Sox for NBC Sports Chicago is pretty big time. It doesn't get much bigger than that.
Well, anyways, so Vinny Duber and I are on the call together for KCOU. I think he was maybe a junior and I was a sophomore. I think you were a freshman.
Yep.
So Parker Lepin, do you remember him, the sports director
Of course.
there?
Yeah.
Parker, by the way, is a really nice guy. I don't know that he's listening to the show, but if by some chance he is, Parker is one of those people who's a really great person, but he messed up one time. So Parker was the sports.
And we're gonna talk about that now.
We're gonna talk about that, and I probably shouldn't have even said what happened. I could have just inserted random person name, but I outed Parker, so we're sorry, Parker.
Bum, bum.
Right. Well, so Parker's the sports director at the time, and the way those broadcasts work, of course, as it comes to no surprise, no one at KCOU Radio wanted to produce this broadcast because it was BCS homecoming week, and typically
number one in the country.
Number one in the country
Oklahoma,
for
yeah.
Oklahoma in the BCS. I think there were 3 or 4 in the AP, but number one in the BCS. So typically the way it worked, and I mean you know this, he sends out a schedule for games. You put what you want, and it's expected that if you do play-by-play, you'll also do some producing, some spotting, be sort of a team player, which most people were, but no one wanted to be the team player for that Oklahoma game. Because obviously, if you're producing, you're back in the studio. At least, if I'm doing play-by-play, I'm still at the environment that can, feel what's going on. So we had no producer for this game. So Parker turned us on to do the pregame show, and like he told us, like, look, I got to get to the game. You guys are gonna have to do like a 45-minute pregame show, like make it as long as you possibly can. So like we had no breaks the whole game because again, there's no producer, and someone has to be at the station to set up the music that plays next. So Parker says, "All right, I'll turn you guys on about 45 minutes before kickoff. Then I'm going to go to the game, and then I'll come after the game to turn you guys off, and then put on whatever's on the station." So, needless to say, it was an incredible win. Parker, like every other Mizzou student except for maybe Tom Castleman, is out there storming the field. And like I texted him, like, at this point, who knows where Parker is? But Parker is nowhere to be seen. So it is like about 45 minutes like after the game that we're still doing like a 45-minute post-game show. Now, keep in mind, this is the student radio station. It's not like we're doing like live interviews from players. We don't have a third analyst to break this down. We don't have a break. Like it's a very like, semi-unprofessional like environment.
Sure.
So it's me and Vinny, the guy I did play-by-play with, doing essentially like a 45-minute post-game show. And we've already done a 45-minute pregame show.
And the whole game.
4-hour game. So like we've been on the air with no breaks for like literally 5.5 hours. And Drew Brackett is, of course, listening to KCOU on his car on the way back from the game, being the loyal listener that Drew Brackett is. Of course, he succeeded Parker as sports director, and Drew Brackett did wonders. And he pops on KCOU, and we're still talking. So Drew sends me a text message. "Why are you guys still talking?" I'm like, "Well, Parker's not there." And I was like, "Can you turn us off?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So Drew Brackett was like the unbarbecuer, always saved the day for college, a great guy. So Drew Brackett finally turned us off the air after a 45-minute post-game show, 5.5 hours later. So we digress, but that was a crazy time. And
then it was a mad dash to the men's room.
Yeah, it certainly was. And I'll tell you this, that weekend, Tom, college game day was it like Friday, Saturday morning is college game day, but they do like a little thing like Friday afternoon, and then people camp out. Like, did you camp out for that or no?
Sure.
You did camp out overnight?
Oh gosh, no.
No? Okay.
Well, I went to the game and that was about it.
Well, okay, so here's what happened Thursday night. Being the procrastinator that I was, I had a paper that was due like, it was one of those, like, do you remember this in college, how sometimes you like submit a paper online in like a folder or something?
On like Blackboard, that? Right?
Yeah. Blackboard. Maybe it was like that. So I had a paper that was due 7 a.m. So being the procrastinator that I am, I got it done at like 4 or 5 a.m. Or maybe it was, no, you know what? I think it was like 6 a.m, right before it was due. And then I had like an 8 a.m. class that day. And then I had like a 1-hour break, but then I had like 3 more classes. And then I think I might have like worked at KOMU, the TV station, that night or something. But basically that day I didn't sleep at all, minus like my 2 hours after getting the paper done. And then Drew and I and his roommate Aaron, who's in the fantasy football league, our 8th and final person, were set. We got money from everyone. Drew and I went and camped out overnight so we can be in the front row of college game day. I remember it was like raining and I had my umbrella or something, and you weren't supposed to have an umbrella. So needless to say, we camped out, didn't sleep at all that night, like the Friday night after 2 hours of sleep on Thursday. And then Saturday, it was basically college game day. And then it was like game time because I had to go to the radio station to do a long pregame show. So didn't sleep that day. That Saturday night after Mizzou won. Crazy night. Didn't sleep at all that night. Went to bed at like 4 a.m. And I got up at like 3 p.m. the next day, maybe 4 p.m. And like I basically got 2 hours of sleep the whole weekend. Just a memorable homecoming week. So Mizzou got their revenge on Oklahoma. So
do you think that today Common could do what then Common 10, 12 year ago Common did? Do you think you could live as in do all those same things, except it's you today doing those things?
Oof. I think so. I mean, I don't know. I've always been a night owl. I don't know. I sleep a
Sure.
lot, but like I sleep at like night. To like I sleep a late schedule, having worked in sports media
Hmm.
late at night. I mean, I think obviously when you're younger, you have more energy. Certainly, I was a more healthier guy then, but I think I can do it. I mean, it's one of those things where you do it on adrenaline. I mean, I didn't want to do the paper, but I had to do it. I didn't want to fail my class. And as far as like the play-by-play for the game and just the whole homecoming college game day, that's like a once in a lifetime experience. So I think I can do it.
Hmm.
I think my recovery time would probably be worse than it was in college because I think after 12 or 13 hours sleeping, I felt fine. I remember going to Mizzou Media Day the next Monday, and I felt fine as far as I can
Hmm.
remember.
Like if it were me today doing that, I probably would have cried at some point. I would have been
I
so
know.
tired.
When you know what it was though,
There would
and
have been a
that's
mental break.
right. And I was thinking in my head how, because you know how college game day is late at night or whatever.
Yeah.
I was thinking in my head how, or like late in the morning rather, how I went straight to the game. Actually, what I did was I had a Salute Your Sports that Saturday. So we went from college game day to Salute Your Sports. Then I went to lunch, and then I went back to the broadcast. So I think if I remember
Good
correctly, there was
Lord.
also a Salute Your Sports in there.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's too much.
at the time, I remember I was like slamming on DeMarco Murray. This is the year before you joined our show, and I was saying how overrated he was, and he ended up not playing very well in that game. And it made me look good. Went on to have a good career
Very
afterwards.
good career,
So sort
yes.
of made me eat my words. But you know how I'm a yards per carry fan, and I didn't love his yards per carry in 2011. But anyways, story time, good times. That was one of the greatest weekends of my entire life, and was very very fun. But what do you have for
Absolutely.
statement of the week?
I
Salutes,
don't know
etc.
even I don't even know if it's that important to go over. Like I talked a couple weeks ago about how, taunting is a penalty. I don't really like it in professional sports because these are all grown adults. They all are paid a salary to be here. They're all of a comparable talent level, more or less. Something I'm on board with is the athletes taunting the fans. I'm fed up with fans. Oh man, we could even go two ways on this one.
Malice at the Palace.
Fans stop fighting in the stadium. I've heard that's a really good documentary. I should check it out. But we've been seeing recently, like ever since like the COVID, opening, we've been reopening more and more since COVID. Fans have been more and more brazen, more and more brash. You've talked about a comment about
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
bad mouthing players when you're courtside in the NBA. These guys are literally like a foot away from you. They can hear you, and they're human beings. They're not. When you purchase a ticket, I guess this is the overarching thesis. When you purchase a ticket, you have a right to enter the facility and view the game and nothing else beyond that. There's no, I
Yeah,
paid for my ticket. I can say whatever I want. And I like that the players are fighting back, particularly in New York with the Mets. One of my favorite non-White Sox players, Javier Baez,
yeah,
thumbs downing the crowd after he scores. Francisco Lindor, I believe, other Mets
yeah.
players are doing this. I'm a big fan of it, and boo the Mets management for coming out and saying that the players will be talked to about this. I think it's fantastic. If you can say, I bought my ticket, I get to say whatever I want. The players get to say, you bought the ticket. You get to listen to whatever I have to say to you. I think it's a
Absolutely.
really fun dynamic that the players can have. They thrive off of the energy from a crowd, both positive and negative. Typically, it's positive when you're home, negative on the road. But for some reason, is it
New
Queens
York.
for the Mets? Oh, I forget which borough it is. I'm pretty sure it's
It's
Queens.
Queens. I think it's
They're just going
Queens.
to boo their own players. So I'm all for the players booing back. And as a side tangent, we've been seeing a lot of fights between fans in the stands. Most recently, Cubs Sox for the crosstown rivalry. First off, these teams are not at comparable levels right now, so we don't really need to be beefing. It's not as if we have two teams in first place that are potentially going to be going together to the World Series. Things are heated. It's pretty clear which team is better than the other one, so we don't need to be
Your team,
exchanging recipes
White
over that
Sox.
in the stands. But I do want to touch on really briefly. It was, I believe, at a Rams game where there's this guy that
I saw that.
basically some lady started a fight. and this guy had haymakers for everybody. He had hands to go around, and it was like, I don't know if it was a friend. Somebody was trying to get away from the fight and pushed him in the back, so he fell forward. I felt the most upset for that guy than any other fan in one of these encounters, because it didn't look like he was the instigator. He was giving everybody plenty of work, and he was pushed in the back, and that's what ended it for him. So I was like, oh, that's my guy. I was really, really upset. I get so upset whenever I see that video over and over and over again, because it's like, he did not deserve this A2 Brute treatment. But a long way to a short point. You don't get to say whatever you want to the players, and if you feel like you do, don't be soft when when they're coming back at you with some smoke.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about pretty much everything you said. I do think it's interesting to note that it's crazy because you can't like have hate speech. It's one thing to like,
Mm-hmm.
boo the opponent, get more
Sure.
riled up about yourself. But even whether it's, first off, whether you're booing the opponent or whatever, you can say boo, or you can make
Mm-hmm.
like some kind of joke, but you can't make anything racial, can't make anything hateful. There is a line that you cross. Basically, I think of it as, if you can't say it at school, think about when you're a kid. If you can't say it in school and you get in trouble, then probably don't say it. Say it at sporting events. And I think some of the racial stuff is really bad. Also, it's not only what fans are saying; some of them are throwing stuff out on the field in various sports. I think we just had that. I think in the French soccer league, I think it just happened. Also, a more recent incident. As far as booing your own players, I'm a believer in positive reinforcement. If your own team isn't playing well, you don't have to cheer them, but booing them doesn't help the case. And as Javier Baez said, it adds extra pressure. But if you are to do that, that's not as bad as some of the racial things we've seen. But I do think it's good for the players to clap back and think about this. If someone is disrespecting you, as a human being, like, you're not gonna sit there and take it. And
Mm-hmm.
the expectation for some people to think that these are athletes, they should take this. That's not fair. That's not true. And I think for a long time, athletes have kind of taken it. But we live in a society now, which, again, more often than not, for the better, sometimes for the worse. But we believe in sort of like sticking up for things, and I don't know what the right word is, but like we're more open and, I guess, sensitive to sort of injustices and things. Like Bob Knight would not like be a coach again in this
Mm-hmm.
in this current culture, nor should he be, because it's one thing to
Yeah.
be a tough love coach. If you've seen, speaking of documentaries, if you've seen the ESPN documentary about Bobby Knight, it's just, some of the stuff is horrifying. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's great to see the fan or the players have a voice, and we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing this across all of sports, not only in relation to fans, but in relation to contracts. Now we're even seeing it in college sports. Basically, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields were a big part in making the college football season happen last season.
Mm-hmm.
The players are what does it. The fans are a big part of the environment. The coach is obviously a big part, universities, the media, etc. But none of this stuff happens without the players. So hats off to the players for getting their word in. I'm all for what Javier Baez did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm good with fans booing, within like a certain parameter, obviously, as you outlined. It's just like when I saw him booing them back, it's just like, that's exactly what this ought to be.
and I
Whether
don't
you're
like.
opposing player or a home player, like if you're getting booed, I think like that interaction is really, really fun. It's just that fans have to learn, to keep it clean on that front. Like you're referencing that Robert Fulghum poem, "Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned in Kindergarten." Let's display some of those tenets,
Yeah.
please.
I was not referencing the specific poem, but thank you for that. I was basically making a similar reference to that poem. But there we have Castleman for the literary analysis. On a final
Hmm.
thought, just to wrap this up, I
Yeah.
do think I'm not the biggest fan of booing your own team. I'm more of like, maybe you boo the other team as opposed to your own. But I do think the only time where I do like booing your own team is if you're booing the coach for decision making, like Matt Nagy for the Bears, and how
Mhm.
he's not going to start Justin Fields. I would boo him constantly.
Yeah.
That's one guy that I would boo, and you wanted him back. I wanted him gone. So
I did want him back.
This is what you signed up for, Tom.
This is on me.
So
we're saying Matt Nagy's now my guy. I now bear responsibility for Matt Nagy.
Yes, you bear responsibility for any injustices he commits towards us Bears fans. And we talked about Aaron Donald. Week 1 for Andy Dalton. He's going to be on the ground quite a lot. We might get, and I don't wish injury upon anyone. I hope that Fields gets in there just because he's better. But we might be seeing Justin Fields with that offensive line sooner than you think. But anyways, that does it for Salute Your Sports. We'll have a big show next week with some NFL previews. We'll be making our Super Bowl picks, and we'll talk over college football, our thoughts on week 1, and much, much more. Big week of betting locks of the week if it is our last week. I want to get to that 500 mark or just below it and hopefully beat Mr. Castleman. Have a good night, everyone.